In preparing this episode, I kept thinking about a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
It may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words of the bad people and the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people.
That quote has been in my mind because the media's failures aren't just about the stories it gets wrong. The media's failures are also about silence, the massive stories it leaves out or barely pays attention to. Last week, for the 100th episode, I gave you a big picture look at why the media twists stories and headlines to try to make people angry and radicalize them further. Today, why the media pays so little attention to stories that should make you angry. There may be no greater example than modern slavery, which currently includes an estimated 50 million people. A recent column from Reuters said it's rising fast. And as I record this, a brand new study says conviction rates are critically low. You probably have not heard about this in the news. I searched major news agencies to check out their coverage over a 12-month period. The silence in this case is stunning. I think stunning is a better image than deafening because when you hear this, you might want to pause for a second just to absorb what it means about our society and our media at this time. Meanwhile, as debates rage about the Iran war, there are big new findings on Islamist terrorism that you should be hearing about. After all, Iran is the biggest funder and organizer of Islamist terrorism worldwide, and Iran and Qatar are the greatest sources of propaganda that fuels it, including here in the United States. The new study finds that terrorism deaths in the West nearly quadrupled last year. And in the United States specifically, they reached the highest level since 2019. The findings about children, especially, should be in headlines everywhere. We have to wake up to this and address it. Plus, amid the slew of attacks on synagogues and other Jewish sites in the West, there's something that is not happening. And that is a big story in and of itself. Also, more messages from listeners and music recorded on your birthday. It's all ahead today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Josh Lebs, and this is They Stand Corrected, the podcast that fact checks the news. Pretty much the only thing in existence and any platform that fact checks the news. That's what it's all about. Recently, for the 100th episode, I invited listeners to send in voice messages, and we got so many that we're going to be sharing them across different episodes. Here's one from Tony Scruggs, a former professional Major League Baseball player.
What I really like about TSC is how you help us see the difference between subjective non-truth and objective truth, which can be the difference between war and peace, or peace of mind and being immobilized by the current tyrantocracy and untruth social. So thank you so much for contributing to the well-being of Team Humanity and specifically Team America. Looking forward to checking out the next 100.
Thanks, Tony. I love his lingo. Part of fighting for truth and Team Humanity and Team America is realizing what's missing from what we're being told. I often mention at the top of the show that I spent 20 years in big mainstream media, 10 on NPR and 10 on CNN, where I became basically the lead on-air fact checker. But it's been a long time since I've mentioned this. And when I created this position for myself, I made a habit of not only seeing what the lies were that I could correct, but also what the big stories were that we were missing. As a result, I started doing something that I discovered very few people do, basically exposing my mind to a lot of the worst things in the world all the time. I was inside CNN and we would get feeds from all over the world. So I was often looking at all sorts of bad things happening everywhere. And I'll tell you, learning to live with that knowledge is a life skill. Learning to see the beauty in humanity and have hope and joy and all those good things. And simultaneously know the tragic, awful things that are being done. You could think of that as context for this show, it is context. It's in the backdrop of everything I report about. See, I know that when people say things like they oppose occupation or are just worried about kids and war, I know for a fact that that's not true because I know about the occupations going on all over the world, which I talked about in episode 1. I know about the more than 100 armed conflicts going on right now, some of which have led to hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths, and that these same people aren't talking about that. So, when big news pops up about humanity and the media is ignoring or burying it, you deserve to know. That's where I'm starting off today. One of the worst things that humanity is responsible for that's going on right now is modern slavery. That includes various forms of forced labor and forced marriage. I try not to do too much with numbers on this show because it can get confusing, but just over half of the total is considered forced labor, and just under half that total is considered forced marriage. But forced labor includes sex trafficking. So when you put that together with forced marriage, you end up seeing that more than half of it can be thought of as being a form of sex trafficking, because forced marriages are very often a form of sex trafficking. You might be like, aren't they always a form of that? I'll get to that in a bit. These are all estimates because so much of it happens in the shadows. Reuters recently ran a commentary saying that the number has increased by 25% over the past 10 years. And the numbers I'm giving you are a few years old. There's nothing more recent than that. So, short version, it's quite possible, even likely, that the total is even bigger than 50 million people. A new study has just been released by the OSCE, that's the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. It found that investigations are increasing big time. That's a good thing. More authorities are probing things like online sexual exploitation and forced begging. But conviction rates remain critically low. Also, traffickers are increasingly leveraging encrypted tools and AI technology. A group called Walk Free estimates that there are more than 1 million people in the United States living in modern slavery. So, this has been happening. A nightmare, a growing, massive problem. Amid all this, how much attention do you think the media has been giving modern slavery and human trafficking? I did something that I often do on this show. I went back and looked at headlines. I started with the biggest newspaper in America, the New York Times. They might even be the biggest news agency in America now with total traffic. As I've said many times, headlines are crucial reporting and a sign of what the news agencies consider important. So I looked at a 12-month period leading up to just recently. In that 12-month period, the New York Times had 0 headlines with the term human trafficking in the paper. It did have a whopping 3 headlines online that contained the term human trafficking. Okay, so 3 headlines, online only, across a year. Here's what those 3 stories were about. 2 were about U.S. politics. One involved these 2 right-wing figures, the Tate brothers, who went to Romania to face charges. Another one was about a name you've probably heard, Abrego Garcia. His immigration battle and the accusations against him here in the United States have been a focal point over Trump's policies. The third was about a mayor of a small town in the Philippines. In that same time period, take a wild guess how many headlines the Times had about Gaza. However many you're guessing, it's probably more. In that time period, 658. I also checked out the CNN Wire. I've explained in the past why that's a good gauge. Over that same 12-month period, the CNN Wire had the term human trafficking in 22 headlines. Okay, that's way more than the New York Times. How many headlines did the CNN Wire have in that same time period about Gaza? 348. So, this massive story, one of the biggest of our time, is barely getting any attention compared to the one that the news likes to obsess over. I will tell you this, the term human trafficking itself, also sex trafficking, those terms are used a lot in conjunction with talk of Jeffrey Epstein. So news agencies could try to respond to what I'm saying here and be like, oh, yeah, we used the term human trafficking so many times. It just wasn't in the headline. But I also looked at that and filtered out stories so that ones about Jeffrey Epstein did not pop up, and almost all stories disappeared. How about forced marriage? I searched the big broadcasters for use of that term at all over the past year. I did find this. This clip starts with a man who was kidnapped and held in Nigeria by the Islamist terrorist group Boko Haram.
2 years ago, I was kidnapped by the dreaded Boko Haram along my way to the airport.
And you were held for how long?
12 days.
And there are many people, especially young girls, who have been kidnapped by Boko Haram, put into forced marriages, forced conversions. They're still in captivity. The situation there is quite dire.
That was Fox News. When I searched the other big broadcasters, I looked for the term forced marriage, and virtually nothing came up. At one point, I thought I had found at least something. It was a clip from 60 Minutes on CBS a year ago. That was during its previous ownership. Maybe the new ownership will actually cover this stuff. Anyway, here is the clip that had that phrase in it.
The coupling of Denmark and Greenland, well, it's complicated.
It's like a forced marriage, if you can say so. At least it was from the Greenlandic side.
So, yeah, no, it was just a metaphor, not a discussion of the horrific reality of forced marriages. Under the estimates I mentioned earlier, we're talking more than 22 million people are currently in forced marriages. I checked out NPR, my other old stomping grounds. I searched all on-air stories over the past 12 months, and I put the words forced marriage in quotes. There were 0 stories. Then I typed in Gaza. Guess how many stories popped up in that 12-month period? 1,769. When I say the media obsesses over anything it can to make Jewish people and Israel look as bad as possible, it's because the media factually does that. This is insane. Meanwhile, there are activist groups on the left complaining that the media is ignoring Gaza, not paying enough attention to Gaza. How about child marriage? According to the latest figures available, 640 million women and girls alive today were married off as children. So were 115 million boys and men. Some of these marriages are two kids being forced to marry each other. That's why I mentioned earlier, not every case of child marriage is what you would imagine as a girl being forced to marry an adult male, but extremely often it is that. It's the kind of thing that Sierra Leone's First Lady, Fatima Marabio, says here.
The important thing for people to understand is that this is not child marriage at all. This is a form of legalizing rape.
That was a recent clip from a CNN interview. I was like, aha, okay, a big news organization actually talking about child marriage. Then I saw why. Here's the introduction to that segment, which references a new report from a commission organized through Columbia University.
I want to bring in 2 notable members of Columbia's Child Marriage Advisory Council, First Lady Fatima Maadbiu of Sierra Leone, and of course, Sheryl Sandberg, who commissioned the report. First Lady Mada, this is something personal to you because you were married at 12.
Give CNN a chance to speak with a nation's first lady and Sheryl Sandberg? That they might be interested in. Actually, for the record, I should mention, I know Sheryl, and I'm so glad she's using her platform this way. Oh, you know what? Okay, here's a little glimpse inside this show. I have already recorded a break that you're probably going to hear in this episode, refers to birthdays. In there, I mentioned that someone several years ago inspired me to start caring about my birthday and taking a moment to feel the joy of having another year. It was her. Anyway, that clip I just shared with you was an extremely rare mention of child marriage over the past year in big media. I also tried searching the term child bride, and this is so today's media. I did find a story from NBC about a female bodybuilder. So we saw her in a bikini through much of this segment.
Roya says she had no basic human rights and was only allowed to attend Quran school. From child bride to teen mom to becoming one of countless Afghan migrants, Roya has amassed a large following. But there are also those who say Roya has brought dishonor to Afghans, that she's shameless. You've also received death threats. Your accounts have been hacked. She has a blunt message for her detractors.
Go to hell. This is my life, this is my body, and I know what's too far for me.
Good for her. Great message. News organizations have mottos that are supposed to indicate to you that they're ready to get you the most important information on earth. The New York Times says all the news that's fit to print. You can see how I changed that. It's up on my Instagram and in the newsletter. CNN had a phrase for a while, maybe it still does, go there. Well, okay, go. Report this stuff. The world desperately needs media to draw attention to these problems and hammer home the message that these things have to be solved. Or you could just keep filling newscasts and main pages of websites and apps and social feeds with the latest rage content that radicalizes people. This is a historic, actually epic failure. When historians tell of this time, they should grab the numbers I just shared with you. I've saved the research and highlight this. Fighting for truth means fighting not just the way stories are covered, but the way decisions are made about what to cover at all. If you want to tell big media to do better, I have guidance for you. See the link in the show notes. Coming up, a new extensive look at terrorism worldwide last year should be a wake-up call to anyone who truly cares about peace and about kids. There is a tool that lets you find music in the public domain that was recorded on any day in the calendar. So you could take your birth date and plug it in and see what was recorded on that date long ago, even more than a century ago. It's a fun little tool. Actually, supporters of this show, if you want to send me your birthday, I could do that for you and do some shout outs for you here. Anyway, this song we're hearing right now came out on my birthday, many decades before I was born. As I record this, I'm celebrating a birthday. It happens to be a special one, a multiple of 18, which is significant to me and to lots of other people who are part of a tiny peoplehood that I'm part of. It is a number that represents life. Several years ago, I was inspired to start marking my birthday, giving it a little focus when it comes around. A woman I know suffered a big loss, and she talked about how she learned from that to start taking a moment each year to feel joy and gratitude for being here for another trip around the sun. So now I do too. To celebrate, I have the levels for membership at the newsletter for this show set to significant figures. Every person who chooses to join the celebration there makes a real impact. I see every name, every message, every action. And you get additional content just for you. When the news feels dark, your support lights a candle. That helps me keep going. I feel so much gratitude, and I try to shine that light back for all of you through this show. Delivering the truth is shining a light. We do that together. Join me in this celebration at theystandcorrected.substack.com or just Google me. It'll pop right up. Debates are raging about the Iran war, what the United States should do, whether it was prepared. There are lots of very serious questions. There is also broad consensus and understanding that Iran is the biggest source of Islamist terrorism worldwide. Democrats and Republicans say this. It's just true. Iran has big oil reserves and uses a lot of money to fund terror. Now, new data is available about terrorism worldwide and here. You should have heard about this in the news, but you probably have not. The report is called the Global Terrorism Index 2026. It does have a piece of good news. Overall last year, killings by terrorism went down worldwide. I'll get to a big reason for that, but first, it's not all good news. It's still a horrific scourge. Virtually all the terrorism is by Islamist groups. The 5 countries worst affected are Pakistan and 4 in Africa: Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, and Congo. On this show, I've reported about terrorist attacks that are part of an attempted genocide of Christians across Africa. A bunch of terror groups in Africa are funded by Iran. That is part of the picture. In the West, which means really what we associate with Western, the United States, Europe, and also Australia is included, terrorism deaths jumped last year by 280%. Fortunately, it's still not a massive total number. 57 deaths are included in that. In this new study from a group called the Institute for Economics and Peace, that 57 figure includes the Islamist terrorist attack in New Orleans on New Year's and an incident in Munich in which an Afghan asylum seeker plowed his vehicle into a crowd. Way to convince a country to give you asylum. There's also the slaughter of a young couple who worked for the Israeli embassy in Washington. And there's the mass killing in Sydney on Bondi Beach during Hanukkah. Charlie Kirk's assassination is included in this figure. I don't see the Colorado firebombing included in here. That was when yet another terrorist yelling "Free Palestine" killed and wounded people. An 82-year-old woman was killed. Several other people were wounded, including an 88-year-old Holocaust survivor. I've asked the group behind that study for more information on how they compiled their totals. So it might not be a complete listing, but these are just killings that took place in terrorist attacks that were not thwarted. Lots of attempted attacks were thwarted, like this in Los Angeles at Christmas. Here's CBS.
4 people who were allegedly planning a bomb attack on businesses across Southern California for New Year's Eve have been arrested. Los Angeles law enforcement officials made that announcement in just the last hour. The Turtle Island Liberation Front, a far-left, pro-Palestine, anti-government, and anti-capitalist group.
And this earlier in the year from local station CBS Detroit.
A 19-year-old man was arrested after officials stopped his alleged planned attack at the Tacom facility here in Warren on behalf of the terrorist group ISIS.
19 years old. Recently, the Islamist terrorists at Gracie Mansion in New York City were 19 and 18. That gets at a big finding in this report that you should be hearing about everywhere. And so far, news giants have been ignoring this. The perpetrators of these Islamist terrorist attacks are getting younger and younger. Increasingly, it's kids under age 18. This study says youth and minors accounted for 42% of all terror-related investigations in Europe and North America in 2025. That's a 3-fold increase since 2021. Reminder, don't worry about numbers. If you want these, you can get them in the newsletter. This study also found that a radicalization process that historically took months or even years can now take place within weeks or even days, driven by short-form online propaganda, algorithmic amplification, and the exploitation of developmental vulnerabilities. It says the involvement of young people in terrorism and violent extremism has become one of the most pressing security concerns of the past decade. While terrorist networks primarily target youths age 15 to 25, active recruitment and ideological indoctrination have been documented in children as young as 8. All that I just shared with you is context for something the media does report on. The alleged deaths of children, including in the media's favorite place to talk about, Gaza. This is the kind of thing that makes some people's brains explode when I explain it. They just can't process this concept, particularly people who have been very deeply entrenched in mainstream media lies for years. But when kids are indoctrinated into Islamist terrorism, starting at a very young age, they become terrorists at young ages and kill people. Very early on in this show, I did a 2-parter about a disastrous interview with the Queen of Jordan. That interview summarized so much of what the media does wrong, setting aside all of its professed values, alleged concerns about democracy, freedom, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and children. It sets all those concerns aside, if doing so will help showcase lies that the news agency itself likes to hear. That is not an opinion, it's a fact. It happens all the time. Here is a clip from that 2-parter. The media is serving as a propaganda force for Hamas. Hamas has tons of teenage terrorists and a history of including people who are over age 18 as children. Think about what this means for you, because all these problems are coming here to America. What you see happening with the media coverage of Israel, it's all on its way elsewhere as well. Imagine that you and a couple friends are with a bunch of kids. Maybe you have kids, maybe they have kids. Along come 3 terrorists who pull out knives or start setting up a bomb, and there is a police officer nearby who tries to stop them, and they're not going to stop, and the police officer manages to shoot them before they kill you and all the kids. In the media's telling, that police officer is now a child killer because those terrorists I just mentioned haven't hit their 18th birthday yet. Think about the horrific school shootings we have in this country. Think about how important it would be for an officer to stop a shooter, even if that shooter's a teenager, before that shooter can go kill a bunch of kids or anyone. In the numbers put out by Hamas, the officer who kills that would-be mass shooter is a child killer if the shooter is under 18. This isn't an accusation or a theory. This is just a straight-up fact about numbers. But here's what the media does. They say X number of thousand kids have been killed. And they're not telling you the truth about any of these being combatants, terrorists. The problem I reported on there is getting worse. A group called ISD Global, that's the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, they report that the primary perpetrators of attacks and plots in the United States inspired by the Islamic State are age 19 and younger. 6 out of 7 of these attacks or plots in the U.S. last year involved at least one suspect that young. And this is where we get back to Iran. Some people might hear about attacks inspired by ISIS, and if they follow these things closely, they might say, well, actually, Iran opposes ISIS, the Islamic State. So maybe Iran is in no way connected to those attacks, but that misses the big picture. Here's what's happening. Iran and its proxies, and Qatar, and other terrorist groups are radicalizing people through what I've reported on in the past, mimetic warfare. It's especially reaching young people this way. These young people in the West don't know or generally care about any differences between ISIS and Iran. The radicalization itself is creating the danger. Young people get radicalized by Iran and others and then carry out terrorist attacks in the name of one group or another. Iran's threat isn't just through funding and physical attacks aimed at killing civilians. Iran is working to turn young Americans and other Western kids into pro-terror radicals. The Global Terrorism Index talks about how pro-terror forces are using anti-Israel and other anti-Semitic narratives to guide people into supporting Islamist terrorism. It's reaching people on the right and the left. In fact, this report uses the term Islamo-leftism. How do you fight back against this? The answer involves a tough truth. It's the same tough truth that explains why terrorist attacks overall went down last year. Here's another old piece of music. That's from 1922. It's Passover music. As you may know, Passover celebrates freedom from slavery. Think Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments. Passover and Easter are linked, and it's believed that the Last Supper was a Seder, which is the ritual ceremonial meal on Passover. Maybe you celebrate Passover, maybe you don't, but will go to someone's Seder this year and learn about it, experience it. Seders are generally awesome. Hey, maybe you're hosting one and want to make yours awesome. If any of these things describe you, then there is a fantastic free resource for you. A guide showing you how to make a Seder meaningful, how to make it timely, how to contribute in a positive way to anyone's Passover experience. Plus, great food. There's a recipe in here for a strawberry shortcake trifle. I don't even bake, but I want to make that. Get this guide. Send it to everyone who might appreciate it. But only do so using my unique link. Thanks to a sponsored partnership, you'll also be helping support this show. So stop what you're doing, check out the show notes, and click on the bit.ly. It's bit.ly. It's a short link, totally safe, to a fantastic organization. Stand against rising anti-Semitism by celebrating Passover and helping your Jewish friends do so with this free guide, only through this link and only through March 31st. The horrors of modern slavery and child marriages don't rile up the audiences that today's big media are chasing. But the audience is there. You listened to this because you care. In addition to pretty much ignoring huge topics, the media also ignores crucial angles of stories. Recently, there have been more and more attacks on Jewish sites across the Western world. When a man plowed his car into a Michigan synagogue, big news organizations rushed to say that he was upset because he had relatives killed in Lebanon. Many of those reports did not mention that his brother, who was apparently killed in an airstrike in Lebanon, was a commander in the terrorist group Hezbollah, one of Iran's proxies. That attack was an attempted terrorist attack in response to the killing of a terrorist figure. But the media didn't tell you that. Meanwhile, there is thankfully no similar phenomenon with tons of attacks on Muslim sites all over the United States and the West, including sites that openly support terrorist groups and Iran. The absence of those kinds of attacks is a positive sign and a story, but one the media refuses to tell. Instead, the media keeps trying to group together anti-Semitism and Islamophobia as though somehow these problems are raging in equal measure. If, heaven forbid, there was an Islamophobic attack, the media would be all over that. They would turn it into a hellish reckoning against the groups that people on the left do hate. I mentioned earlier that worldwide terror deaths went down last year. A giant reason is that some governments took greater action. How, when, and where to fight against this scourge is up for debate. But debates should be informed by facts. When the media fails to deliver them, it is failing you. As always, I want to know what you think. Love looking at your messages, your questions as well. They help guide me in determining what to talk about, what to cover. There are two great ways to reach me. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is through a form at my website. Just go to joshlebs.com, and you'll see where you can click to submit a question or comment. I see every message. Please be sure to rate and review this show, trigger those algorithms to get other people to discover it. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.